Welcome to The Behaviorist. Tonight we're recording an impromptu episode for our beloved clients because we can't call you all from our hotel in New York City. We want to talk about leading through crisis. And one of the things that happened this week, we had our Work Wisdom Academy, and the topic for the academy was authentic leadership. And we had the leaders read an article called The Authenticity Paradox. Did you read that article, Kendra?
I read part of it, but I certainly heard the leaders talk about it.
Yeah, it seemed to resonate with everyone, and it definitely did with me because it talked about this idea of being authentic and upfront and how sometimes that can be a problem. That's why paradox is in the title. But one of the leaders that was interviewed for the article talked about how she had this new job and she was really nervous about it, and she expressed that to her new direct reports. And she really thought that it was important to be upfront and to be authentic and honest. And so she told them, her new employees, how scared she was and how good of a job she wanted to do, and she needed their help, and it really backfired.
How did it backfire? They lost trust, or?
Yeah, they didn't trust her, and she lost credibility.
Okay.
And so when we were talking about it, even after the academy, Jamie was talking about how, yeah, you want to be authentic, you want to be upfront, but you need a plan.
Yeah.
So I think what's happening in the world, this idea of a crisis probably is more real, more present for some of our clients, even for Work Wisdom. There are things that we need to think about. So we thought this topic of leading through crisis would be really important to talk about.
Yeah, I think it is so important right now. I like what you're saying about the authenticity paradox. And, I know that the word authenticity has been debated even within the Work Wisdom Academy student body around, should we aspire to be authentic? Is authentic positive? How is authentic different than sincere? I think the important thing to think about in that authenticity paradox article is that, yes, we can show our vulnerability, but we do need a plan. If we are leading, especially if we're leading through crisis, it is our responsibility to provide our followers, our peers, those around us, with a concrete, hopeful, creative, solid plan. And so as I've been thinking about what kind of advice we can be giving to our clients this week in particular, I've been thinking about how do we help them create a concrete plan, even if it's a baby plan, just right. a quick wins kind of plan, but one that understands the overall company strategy, really leans into the differentiators of your company, and then responds contextually to what's happening in the economy or in the environment. So I think that with a short amount of time, if we as leaders have done our work in understanding what our winning aspiration is, understanding what our big questions are, understanding what our differentiators are, and absorbing the context of the economy, the environment, then we can fairly quickly come up with a way that we can pivot so that we can provide a contextual, hopeful plan. And then of course, articulating that clearly,
right,
and quickly to our teams. I think that is the first part of leading through chaos that I just want all of our clients to be thinking about. How do we create this contextual plan that leans into our differentiators, that sees opportunity even?
Okay. Wow. Okay, so that's your first tip.
Yeah, that would be one thing that I would say. A lot of our clients, what's happening in the economy as well as in the health of the country. Both are crises in
Right.
different ways, and they're certainly interrelated. So I think there's some uncertainty as well. There's what we know, and then there's sort of the wisdom of unknowing and how we hold the tension while we're moving through this. But at least we can make small, concrete plans that we transparently articulate to our team. So I think that's the first part. The second part that I've been thinking about for our clients has so much to do with resonance and how we as leaders resonate with our teams. Because of our open loop limbic systems, because we are emotionally contagious, and because we as leaders have greater weight in our contagion than do others, I think it's incredibly important for us to stay self-aware about how we are showing up and what kinds of wavelengths we are putting out to those around us.
Do you think when it's a crisis that becomes even more key?
I do.
Yeah.
I think that because people are looking for answers.
Right.
And they want, we were talking to a client today, and the teams are feeling even more vulnerable. And so it's one of the most important times in a leader's career where they can show up as authentic, with a plan, hopeful, realistic, and affiliative, and still visionary. But again, realistically visionary, I think is really important. So I think leaders need to make sure that they are doing the work that they need to be doing in terms of resonating and not becoming dissonant. So making sure that they are sending out the right kinds of positive vibes. And if they start to slip into sacrifice syndrome because of what's happening with the crisis, that they quickly tap into the renewal cycle that we've read about. Richard Boyatzis talks about, and Annie McKee, where you go to mindfulness, you go to hopefulness, and you go to compassion for yourself and for others in order to renew, so that you can go back to a place where you're resonating in a positive way, which is inspiring for others. I think the other part of resonant leadership at this point is you're just praying to God that all that work you've done to establish a psychologically safe team has worked.
Yeah.
Because this is when you need a team that is fearless and is willing to speak up and willing to point out mistakes and give and receive feedback in rapid fire. And so you need to make sure that you have those really high levels of psychological safety. So I would say that's the second thing that we really want to be checking in on ourselves right now as we're leading through crisis, is that we are doing the work that we need to do, the emotional hand washing that we need to be doing. Maybe wash those emotions twice.
Just like
our hands. Yeah. So that when we're showing up, that we are resonating in all of the right ways. I also was thinking about resonant leadership. Part of resonant leadership is that we are democratic in our decision making. And if you talk to me, most days of the year, I'm all about being as democratic as possible, getting as many people to weigh in on all the options and having long collaborative discussions. This is one of the times that I believe that having high competing in your toolbox is so critical. So when there's a crisis, it's essential that a leader feels comfortable going high assertive, and maybe even a little less cooperative than normal, just because time is of the essence. So we teach all 5 styles of how to manage differences, and we don't always spend a lot of time on helping people learn how to be high competing. But absolutely, this is one that we need to pull out in times like this.
Okay. So that's your third tip. That's really good. Do you have any others?
That's sort of my second tip. It kind of goes along with resonant leadership. Yeah. And just, resonance usually has to do with being democratic. But in this case, I kind of think that's, you want to shift a little to the left if you think in terms of that grid, and you want to go a little more high competing than collaborative, just because time is so critical. So I guess the other thing that I've been thinking about as I've coached other leaders through crisis, I'm thinking back to the recession of 2007 and 8, and a leader in particular who had to just be responsible for lots of layoffs, and it was just incredibly hard on that business. And I remember the advice that I gave him then was to think 10 years out, to go 10 years into the future, and then do backcasting where you could look 10 years back on yourself. And you could think about, if a reporter were to be interviewing you 10 years from now and asking you about some crucible moment in your leadership, and you're reflecting on this crisis, what would you tell that reporter that you were proud of in how you managed that crisis? So I guess in terms of the clients that we work with right now who are experiencing the current crisis in a variety of ways, I'd really want them to take themselves to 2030. And I want them to think about when that reporter asks them to reflect back to this crisis in 2020, whether it's Corona or it's the recession or all the cancellations or whatever's happening. And when that reporter asks you, what were you proud of in how you managed that leadership crisis? You'll notice that you'll have some clues, because even when I'm thinking about myself and I'm thinking about leading through this crisis for Work Wisdom, I think about what I'd like to tell that reporter in 10 years, and I'd love to tell her, boy, we were really creative in how we reshaped the company, and we were really helpful and agile. And we figured out how to bond together in order to weather that crisis. Yeah. And we came out of that crucible a completely different company, still had the same values, but boy, did we have different methods by the time we got to the other side of that crisis. So those, I guess, are my tips that I'd like to, hopefully those can be helpful for some of our clients when they're trying to lead through crisis this week or this year, thinking about how do we create a concrete plan that's hopeful, creative, solid, even if it's short, how do they also make sure that they're resonating, doing that emotional hand washing, doing that renewal, praying that psychological safety has really taken hold, and maybe even leaning into high competing, and then taking themselves through a backcasting exercise where they think about what they say to that reporter in 2030 about how they managed through this crucible.
Thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time for this quick little conversation.
You bet.
I think this will be helpful. They're really good reminders. Thank you for listening to our podcast, and always remember to reach out to us on our website, workwisdomllc.com. We want to end with a quote. This one's from JFK.
Yeah.
It's a good one. He said, "When written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger, and the other represents opportunity."